The King of Fighters 15 open beta test was conducted over this past weekend, and I played a bunch of it. I played as much as I could, streaming it on my Twitch channel, and so I wanted to let you guys know my impressions of it. Firstly, I just want to make a disclaimer here. I do not claim that any of my gameplay you're seeing here is particularly skilled at all, because even though I have played several fighting games, I do not consider myself good at King of Fighters at all. The only other times I've played King of Fighters, my shallow King of Fighters history includes playing around and experimenting with the training mode of King of Fighters 2002, and also doing some of the trials in King of Fighters 13, but I've never actually, or I had never actually played a King of Fighters game online against actual opponents until this beta test. The biggest thing that I had to get used to was well, I'm not actually used to it at all yet, I'm still getting used to it, but the most significant thing that threw me off was the short hops, the short hop mechanic. That seems to play a very big part in this game, and just seems to be a very integral part in this franchise's skill cap. So, if you don't know what a short hop is, basically, you know how you can do a regular jump by tapping up on the stick? A short hop is if you tap the up direction, so if you input a jump for, I think it's 4 frames or less, it's something like that. You have to just barely feather if you're playing a fight stick, you have to just barely feather the top actuator to get a short hop. Doing it in place, my consistency is okay. I noticed that, well, at first, I thought my consistency was never going to get better. But by the end of the 3-day beta, I actually noticed, surprisingly, that even though my consistency wasn't great, it did actually get better. So I was happy with myself in that regard. But doing a neutral short hop is simple enough because you can kind of flick the stick. You can flick the stick upwards in order to get a short enough input. But the one that was really challenging for me was doing the hyper hop. So to do a hyper hop, the game wants you to input a hop input while running, and this game doesn't have any kind of macro for run, so you have to actually tap forward twice, right, and then hold it for as long as you want to run. So you have to roll the stick slightly upwards for a brief period of time while holding forward. And if you remember what I said that you could normally just flick the stick upwards to get a neutral hop, right? But you can't really flick the stick if you're already holding it right or left while you're running, right? So I eventually discovered that the best way to do this, at least for me, and some other King of Fighters player, an actual King of Fighters veteran, later recommended to me and corroborated what I had already kind of discovered myself. Yeah, I recommended that you think of the hyper hop as sort of an upside down hyper jump or super jump, whatever it's called. So a lot of fighting games, including this one, has a super jump in which you can jump higher if you input down and then up. So instead of inputting down briefly and then up to do the hyper hop while running, if you conceptualize it in that you want to tap up and then immediately bring it down, it just seems to help because subconsciously it makes you bring it down faster as soon as you bring it up. So that started to help me. Also, the other big thing that surprised me in terms of how high of a skill cap it had was just hit confirming things in general, because most of the moves in this game are so fast and snappy that it makes it pretty challenging to actually consistently hit confirm things into your combos. Even though the fast and snappy animations do look very good, and it does make the game look very cool and fun to play. So, despite me being a KoF noob, did I like the game? Yes, I actually really like this game. It's going to be a day one buy for me, which is really refreshing, right? Because the last fighting game beta test I did was the Guilty Gear Strive beta test, and I know some people like that game, I know some people are enjoying that game, but honestly, after the last Guilty Gear Strive beta test, I was pretty disappointed because I am just not a fan of that game's game design philosophy. I'm not a fan of that game's direction, even though it does look and sound very cool. And more recently, the last beta test I did just in general, not specifically a fighting game beta test, but the most recent beta test I did was for Babylon's Fall, the looter slasher multiplayer game being produced by Square Enix and developed by Platinum Games. Platinum Games is one of my favorite developers ever, right? And so you can imagine how disappointed I was when the Babylon's Fall beta test was pretty underwhelming. I have a separate video for that if you want to hear my thoughts on that. But anyways, my point is, the last several beta tests I have partaken in have not been great. So the fact that this King of Fighters 15 beta test was so good is a very welcome trend breaker. Let's now talk about the visuals and sound and overall presentation with the game, because that's what you're looking at right now, and so that's going to be the most obvious thing, and then I will move on from there. So the game looks great, as you can see. It's actually pretty impressive how good they were able to make this game look, considering this game's art style is comparable to the Street Fighter art style, which comes across as very uncanny in Street Fighter V. For example, both King of Fighters 15 and Street Fighter go for the exaggerated hand and feet proportions, presumably to better communicate to players through the screen that the hands and the feet are the things with hitboxes that you have to watch out for when your opponent is throwing out normals from mid-screen and so on, right? And I think a lot of people can agree with me that in Street Fighter, some of the characters, maybe more than some of the characters, are just very off-putting. However, in King of Fighters 15, all the characters, at least all the characters that we were given control over, all of the characters that were offered in the beta test, they all look really good. As for the UI, the user interface for King of Fighters 15, it's pretty good. It's obvious that they were going for readability over style, but even considering that, I think they did a pretty good job of making the UI look good and also readable. For example, even though the UI is pretty clean overall, the meter, when it's filled up all the way, when it says maximum on it, it's in black and yellow, and to me, it makes me think of crime scene tape, which makes it even cooler. Even though that's probably not what they were going for specifically, I think it looks cool. To put it another way, I think King of Fighters 15 succeeded at what Guilty Gear Strive tried to do with its UI, because in Guilty Gear Strive's case, it's pretty obvious that they were trying to go for a more minimalist UI, but it just did not work in that game at all. But King of Fighters 15 is a pretty good example of how to make a UI that values readability over all else, while still looking good and fitting with the rest of the game. King of Fighters 15 also sounds really good as well. The music is really cool. Every single track I heard, I really liked. There were several tracks that could play in these stages. There were only 3 stages, but there were several tracks that could play in this beta test. And also the hit sound effects are really satisfying as well. Although, not unexpectedly, with this being a beta test and all, there were some visual audio glitches that happened every now and then. Like, for example, the sound effect for a move would start to play, but then immediately go silent. And most of these glitches, actually, I noticed that most of them were on Iori for whatever reason. But obviously, these things are going to be fixed. Now that I've gotten the visuals and sound and presentation out of the way, now I can get into the real substance here, right? So I'll address the big thing that most people are probably thinking about, and that's the netcode. How does the game play online? King of Fighters 15 does, in fact, use officially licensed GGPO, so yes, it is pretty good rollback netcode. However, there are some aspects about it that will probably be fixed or improved by the time the game comes out, because even though they are using officially licensed GGPO, they do have to implement it into the code of the game themselves, right? So, for example, one oddity we found was that when somebody playing on PS4 is connecting and fighting an opponent playing on a PS5, I play on PS4, someone that I was sparring with quite a bit during this beta test was playing on PS5. He pointed out that he was having more rollback frames than I was. And then after that, I saw some reports of other people experiencing this same issue. So this whole asymmetrical rollback frame thing, they are probably going to want to fix that. But even with the good visuals, the good music, and the good rollback netcode, why do I like this game so much more than Guilty Gear Strive? It's because the gameplay of King of Fighters 15 is just so much more fun. It's fast-paced, it's exciting, and the characters have really cool combos that they can do. My only critique about the gameplay is regarding the auto combos, right? So I'm not against the idea of auto combos inherently. It's just that the whole point of auto combos, the whole idea of auto combos is that auto combos are pretty much just supposed to be there for beginners, so that way they can still feel like they're doing stuff, right? They can still make the characters do visually exciting things, but the auto combos are never supposed to be the optimal thing to do, right? Because obviously at higher level play, the manual combos should be the things that lead to higher damage, right? Naturally. That's still technically the case, right? The characters in this game do have very good, very cool manual combos. However, the auto combos just do way too much damage. They do a surprisingly high amount of damage, so much so that if it stays like this, I actually do expect some auto combos to show up in high-level tournaments. So my suggestion there is that they should definitely scale down the damage of auto combos. It's mostly because, well, okay, so the way auto combos work in this game is that I thought that they were going to behave kind of like the auto combos in Dragon Ball FighterZ. So I haven't played Dragon Ball FighterZ, but I've heard in Dragon Ball FighterZ that auto combos actually do have a place at high level, because what a lot of high level players do is that they use auto combos just as an easy hit confirm, and then from that they convert into manual combos for actual big damage, right? However, in King of Fighters 15, you cannot actually use the auto combos as a hit confirm to convert into bigger combos. If you start doing an auto combo, I think, at least based on my experimentation in the game, the only thing you can do is to just finish the auto combo. And how the auto combos work in this game is that it starts with a jab, and you do 3 jabs, so you mash jab 3 times, and then based on the 4th button pressed, it will give you a different super. So you have multiple different supers in this game, right? So you might want to do one over another just based on how much meter you have left, how much meter you want to conserve, if something would be overkill or not, if you know that one thing is going to kill your opponent anyway, so you don't need to spend extra meter, right? So that is how the auto combos are designed in this case. However, if you just hit jab again, sorry, when I say jab, it's light punch. I'm not used to King of Fighters button notation. I'm used to playing fighting games with like light, medium, heavy, special, or something like that, right? I'm not used to the light punch, heavy punch, light kick, heavy kick. But anyways, so you hit light punch 3 times in a row, and then the 4th button press will determine the finisher, right? If you press light punch as the 4th button, so literally if you just mash light punch 4 times in a row, it will automatically give you the most damaging thing. And this is where it's an issue, because if you just mash on light punch and it gives you the most damaging thing, it does so much damage, because if you have enough meter to do your big super and it auto combos into your big super, you're doing about half of your opponent's HP worth of damage, which is way too much for any auto combo, right? So, like I said, they just definitely need to scale that down, because it does not look like it's getting scaled enough. In fact, it might not even be getting scaled at all. So if it's not getting scaled at all, that's crazy. They need to actually scale the damage. If it is getting scaled, then it just needs to get scaled more. So that's an easy fix, and I expect them to tweak that. If not at launch, then they will definitely be tweaking that after launch. So I'm not particularly worried about it. I just wanted to let people know. Also, I probably should have mentioned this earlier. I'm pretty sure I alluded to it, but I did not explicitly say it. There were 8 playable characters during this beta test out of the 39 that the game is going to launch with, which is a lot of characters. That's a crazy big roster for the base version of a game, right? Because Guilty Gear Strive only launched with 15. This game, on the other hand, is going to launch with more than double. That's 39 characters, so that's going to be a really big selling point, right? But as for this beta test that we played over this weekend, we only had 8, and I did play all of them. By play all of them, I mean I at least checked out their moveset. So I went through the move list for each of these characters just to get a feel for them and to see what kind of archetype they are, and also just to see how they feel, right? And I already said that the game feels really good. Literally, all 8 of the characters in this beta test felt really nice and were fun in their own way. The 8 being Iori, Kyo, Chizuru, Shermie, Yashiro, Chris, Shune, and the new character, Dolores. The character that I spent the most amount of time with in labbing combos and also playing them online was Shermie, naturally, because Shermie was the only grappler out of these 8 characters. And knowing that we only had a mere 3 days to get good enough at this game to get to at least a level at which we could start having fun online before the beta test would end, I initially just played Shermie by doing the single versus mode. Typically speaking, King of Fighters is a 3v3 game. It's not a tag game like Marvel vs. Capcom. There aren't assists in the game. But how it works is you build a team of 3 characters, so the only thing that really matters is the order. So the meter in King of Fighters games is shared across your whole team. So obviously when you start a match, you start with no meter, and then as you do offensive things, it accumulates, right? So the main thought process that goes into team building in this game is that you want to put your most meter-hungry characters at the back and the least meter-dependent characters in the front. So that is the extent of the team building. However, even with all that said, every character in this beta test, just from watching other people play the game and watching combo videos and stuff like that, I saw that every character in this beta test had a combo which could breach around 90% HP. Some of the characters even had real touch of death combos in which they could nuke an entire HP bar with just that one combo, which is usually something you would only see in 3v3 tag games like Marvel vs. Capcom or Power Rangers Battle for the Grid, right? So you might be really shocked to hear that this game has touch of deaths. However, don't be alarmed, because the only cases in which you are going to get someone doing a huge combo like that is when you have 5 bars of meter, and the only instances in which somebody is going to have that much meter is if for some reason you refrain from using meter entirely with your second character and just stockpile it all for your last character. And in most cases, realistically speaking, that would not be the best decision. So maybe every now and then you'll see a big 90% or touch of death combo in a tournament or something, and it'll be a really hype moment. But those situations will definitely be pretty rare. Anyways, my point is that even though the whole team building thing is an aspect of this game, it seems as if every character is going to make for a decent anchor, so you really don't have to worry about the team building too much. It's going to mostly come down to who do you want in the front. So after learning Shermie and exclusively playing her online on the first day, I decided that I wanted to at least play the team versus mode at least a little bit, just because that's the main game mode. So the second character that I learned was Shune. He's the character that I put the second most amount of time into. I'm really surprised that I ended up liking Shune, considering how often I make fun of his character design. But he's pretty easy to use, and like I said, I only had 3 days, so I didn't want to pick some super complicated character that would take me a week to learn when I only had 3 days, right? So Shune is pretty easy to use. He's pretty much an all-arounder, and he has an air dash, which is actually pretty fun because it makes you feel like you're playing an anime fighter or something. And then the other character, the last character in my team, not when I say last character, I don't mean the last in order, right? I made Shermie the anchor because I had the most experience with Shermie, and so whether she was the most meter hungry or not, I just put her in the back because I knew that I could make the most use of meter with her, so I had her in the back. I had Shune in the middle, and so the last character that I learned, but the character that I put in the front of my team was Yashiro, because Yashiro, out of the 8 characters in this beta test, Yashiro was definitely one of the best, just because he had the lowest skill floor. So by that, I mean that he was definitely the easiest character to just pick up and start playing, because he has really big oppressive normals that he can just throw out safely in neutral, and that automatically makes him a pretty easy to play character. And also his combos are pretty easy to do as well. So I just slapped him on the front of the team so I could use him to start building meter for the other 2 characters. Pretty quickly, though, after playing a few matches of the team versus mode, I realized that I just wanted to go back to single versus, because even though I really like the idea of team versus, and even though that will be the main game mode that I play when the game comes out, having only 3 days to play the game, I really just wanted to learn one at a time, because it felt way too neurotic and scatterbrained to be playing a character in the team versus mode, right? And then you miss a hit confirm, for example, and so then you really want to make up for it by actually successfully hit confirming the next time you land that hit. But then it's a while before you actually play that character again, because when that character dies, it moves to your next character, right? And then you have to readjust your brain for that. So I much prefer to just in the learning process to learn one character at a time. So that way, whenever you lose a round with the character and you really want to try your hand again at landing a certain combo or something, you can literally just immediately retry it, because whether that was the end of the match or not, if you hit rematch, it'll just immediately take you back into more gameplay with the same character. So after returning to playing Shermie exclusively, even though I really like her command grabs, even though I really like how she feels and her combos and all that, I noticed that for some reason I just could not figure out how to play her in neutral, even though I know she definitely is a competent character, right? But I was kind of having trouble in neutral with her, and I was also noticing that a lot of other people were playing Shermie as well. I was encountering a lot of mirror matches. And so I figured, because a lot of other people are playing her right now, and also because I know I'm going to spend a bunch of time with her once the game releases anyway, I think I would actually prefer to play Shun'ei mostly for the rest of this beta test. So, I stayed in the single versus mode, but I switched to playing Shun'ei just because I actually didn't see anyone else playing him. I didn't encounter a single Shun'ei when I was fighting randos. And so I just wanted to play a more typical character, right? Shun'ei is definitely what I would consider to be the Shoto of this game, because even though Kyo and Iori are the main characters, they are just Rekka man. They have a ton of Rekkas, and it wasn't immediately apparent when I was going through their move list why you would want to do one Rekka option over another one, and so I just did not want to waste time learning all of that when time was so limited. On the other hand, the characters that I fought against the most, the characters that I got the most amount of matchup experience against, they were Shermie. Like I said, she was a pretty popular pick. Also Yashiro, which is how I realized how strong he was at a low level in the first place, because he just keeps on pressuring you with his big old normals. And also Dolores, which is the new character, and I definitely think that Dolores is the strongest out of those 8 characters. She just has so much space control, it is so hard to get in on her. Part of her kit reminds me of Ivy from Soul Calibur, because she has, like Ivy, she has a command grab. It's not a hit grab, it's an actual real command grab that just appears on the floor below your feet, and so literally you're constantly scared to just stand there because you're scared of this command grab coming out from the floor, right? But you're also scared to jump because she has this anti-air grab, so I don't know how you're supposed to get in on her. I can foresee a lot of people complaining about her being OP when the game launches. But I don't want to spend too much time talking about the game's balance, so back to the actual mechanics. Something that I really like in this game are the Shatter Strikes. Well, actually, if you just input the button command, I forgot what it was because I made a macro for it, but you have a move that you can do which launches your opponent away and you get a wall bounce, and if you're fast enough, if you run over there and follow it up, you can actually combo off of it. But if you input a quarter circle before doing this button combination, you get what's called a Shatter Strike, which is the same animation, but instead of it knocking your opponent across the screen and getting a wall bounce, you actually just get a restand on the spot, and it's really satisfying comboing into this and keeping a combo going with it. I think it scales damage though, so you definitely don't want to do that early in a combo. You definitely want to delay it as much as possible, right? But it's just really satisfying to land, like I said. Shermie's Shatter Strike had a really bad hitbox, though, so whenever I did a combo with her, whenever I did a Shatter Strike combo with her, lots of times, my opponent would just fall out of the combo, mid-combo, when I go for the Shatter Strike, because I'd be comboing them, and then I'd do the Shatter Strike, but because the hitbox is so shallow, it would just whiff the opponent mid-combo, and then I could get punished for whiffing. So that was another reason why I decided to switch to Shun'ei during this beta test, because it was already rare enough for me to successfully hit confirm something, and I did not want to keep on dropping my Shatter Strike combos. Speaking of messing things up, I don't know if I would count this as a critique per se, because even though it was inconveniencing me in one regard, there's probably a litany of other ways in which you can exploit this for your benefit. But what I'm talking about is this game's buffer system. So specifically, with Shun'ei, being a typical character, he has some quarter circle forward motion inputs, and he also has some DP inputs, right? So I noticed that lots of times in neutral, when I tried to throw out his quarter circle forward move, I would get his DP instead. And this was because being in neutral, I'd be walking around, right? Sometimes I would be holding forward. Sometimes I would be walking forward or running forward right before I input the quarter circle forward, right? So I noticed that I was getting the DP instead of the fireball whenever I would be holding forward before I input the fireball, right? So I was just assuming that whenever I got the DP by accident, it was because I was accidentally pressing the button before I made a full fireball, right? Because if I had been holding forward from walking, and then I started to input a fireball, that's literally what a DP motion is. So I just consciously told myself, oh, okay, so I must be hitting the button too early for some reason whenever I go for fireball. So I just have to make sure that I do the full motion before I hit the button. Easy adjustment, right? That's one of the most basic motion inputs ever. I don't know why I'm screwing this up. However, I was not actually screwing it up because after deliberately testing this, even if you input a full quarter circle forward motion right after pressing forward or holding forward, the game will give you the DP move instead. So knowing this, that would mean that whenever you want to throw out a quarter circle forward move in neutral, you would have to stop and make sure that you are not walking forward or running forward. You would have to stop for a brief period of time before you input the move to make sure you would get the move you want instead of a DP. And obviously that would inconvenience your movement in neutral a lot. My natural reaction to this would be to hope that they just fix this, right? However, like I've been saying, I'm not a KoF veteran, so maybe this kind of buffer system has been in the franchise this whole time, in which case, surely actual KoF veterans would have found a way to make this exploitable in other aspects of the game, right? So if this really is a legacy thing that KoF players have become accustomed to over time and they like it, I would not want them to change it, right? So for anyone listening, if you know if this has been the way KoF buffer systems have always worked, then please let me know in the comments. The last thing I want to talk about in detail is King of Fighters 15's lobby system. If you remember only one thing about the Guilty Gear Strive beta tests, it's that Guilty Gear had terrible lobbies. Well, still has terrible lobbies, actually, but the terrible lobbies during the beta tests for Guilty Gear Strive is actually the whole reason we got 3 Guilty Gear Strive beta tests in the first place. King of Fighters 15, on the other hand, actually has a functional lobby in its first beta test on the first try by literally copying lobby conventions that have already existed for years, and they didn't try to reinvent the wheel like Guilty Gear. In fact, KoF15's lobby system even has an ID search feature. Whoa, how novel. Ha! Did you hear that, Virtua Fighter 5? You can actually search for specific lobbies. Part of me actually kind of wishes that KoF15's lobbies were at least a fraction of how bad Guilty Gear Strive's lobbies were, so that way we could maybe get a second beta test before the game comes out. Independent from the lobby's design, there actually was a pretty common bug that was happening in these lobbies, and it was that when someone that wasn't a host would ready up before the host, they would become the host of the room, which is obviously not by design. So maybe we actually could get a second beta test after all, but it's probably a really easy fix, and the game is coming out pretty soon. It's coming out in February, so I think it's unlikely that we get a second beta, but I would very much like one. Anyway, as I have already said, I'm super excited for this game. It is a day one purchase for me. After the Guilty Gear Strive beta tests, I was thinking, I don't want to get Guilty Gear Strive at launch, but I'll probably pick it up on the first sale. Lo and behold, it's had multiple sales, and I haven't even picked it up yet. This game, on the other hand, I'm so excited for this, and like I said, I'm going to be buying this full price as soon as it launches so I can immediately start practicing, because even though I'm not good at this game at all, I really want to get good at it, right? So let me know if you plan on getting the game, and thanks for listening, and if you found this video insightful, make sure you hit the like button to help me out, and if you have any questions or comments, make sure you leave them in the comments section. Obviously, that's what it is used for. So with all that said, I will see you all later, and bye for now.